History books often get the Middle Ages completely wrong. We are about to uncover 25 hidden medieval technologies, so advanced they feel like science fiction. By the end of this, you will see this era not as a dark void, but as a cradle of brilliant invention. How did a simple farming tool trigger a population explosion that reshaped continents? What secret device allowed builders to construct cathedrals that still defy gravity today? The answers reveal a legacy of ingenuity that secretly built our modern world. Are you ready to rethink everything you thought you knew about the past? That label, the Dark Ages, was a brilliant piece of self-promotion by later scholars eager to make their own era shine brighter. The truth is, the medieval world was anything but dark. For 1,000 years, from the 5th to the 15th century, societies across Europe, the Islamic world, and Asia were dynamic workshops of invention. Far from being a time of stagnation, this was a period where necessity became the mother of some of history's most overlooked innovations. Think about the driving forces behind this creativity. Monasteries were not just quiet places of prayer. They were bustling scriptoriums and libraries where ancient knowledge was meticulously preserved and expanded upon. Rising towns and cities demanded new solutions for housing, sanitation, and trade. And then there was the simple, pressing need to feed more people, which pushed farming technology to its limits. This was a world connected by sprawling trade routes like the Silk Road, where ideas flowed as freely as spices and silk, cross-pollinating across continents. It is within this vibrant, complex, and surprisingly connected world that we find the seeds of our modern world, waiting to be rediscovered. That dense, wet soil of northern Europe was a formidable enemy for early farmers. Their simple scratch plows barely disturbed the surface, leaving the land's rich potential locked away. Then came a technological marvel that would change everything: the heavy plow. This was no minor upgrade, it was a revolution on wheels. Its design was brilliantly simple yet devastatingly effective. A sharp, iron-tipped coulter sliced vertically into the earth. Then a mold board, a curved plate, lifted the cut sod and turned it completely over. This single action was transformative. It buried weeds for a natural fertilizer, aerated the dense soil for better root growth, and created the drainage furrows that these wet climates desperately needed. Vast tracts of land once considered useless for farming were suddenly thrown open to cultivation. The result was an unprecedented agricultural boom. For the first time, farms could produce far more food than a single family needed. These massive surpluses became the true fuel for a new world. With reliable food supplies, populations began to swell. This abundance also freed people from the relentless toil of subsistence farming, allowing them to specialize in trades like blacksmithing, weaving, or carpentry. This specialization became the economic heartbeat of rising towns and cities. So the heavy plow was far more than just a tool. It was an engine of societal transformation, literally reshaping the European landscape and laying the very foundation for modern civilization. And this was just the beginning of medieval ingenuity. But to build a world of stone cathedrals and fortified cities, you first need to move mountains of stone. For centuries, the sheer physical labor of construction was an almost insurmountable barrier. How do you lift a block of stone weighing several tons to the top of a soaring wall? The answer arrived in the form of a machine that turned human footsteps into monumental force: the treadmill crane. Picture a giant wooden hamster wheel, but one built for a person. A worker would step carefully inside, and by walking steadily forward, he would rotate the entire wheel. This motion, through a clever system of gears and a central drum, would slowly wind a rope hoisting immense weights high into the air. It was a simple, elegant, and brutally effective piece of engineering. The real genius was in its gearing. The system provided what engineers call mechanical advantage, meaning the slow, steady pace of the walker was transformed into a powerful lifting force. A single man inside the wheel could lift what might otherwise require 50 men hauling on ropes. This was not about raw muscle, it was about outsmarting the weight. This single invention fundamentally changed the landscape of Europe. It made the impossible seem possible. Those breathtaking Gothic cathedrals, with their spires scratching the heavens, were not just acts of faith, they were triumphs of engineering made real by the rhythmic, endless steps of a man in a wheel. Yet, even with the power to lift stone, builders faced another profound challenge: how to design these colossal structures so they would not collapse under their own weight. That very challenge of supporting immense weight led to one of architecture's most elegant solutions, a concept so simple it was hiding in plain sight. The pointed arch was far more than a beautiful design. It was a structural revolution in stone. Unlike the older, semicircular Roman arch that pushed its weight outwards and downwards with immense lateral force, the pointed arch channeled its load almost straight down. This fundamental change in physics meant that walls could be built taller and thinner, and they no longer needed to be massive, windowless bulwarks just to hold the roof up. Builders realized they could now punch huge openings into these walls, openings that they filled with breathtaking stained glass, flooding the interiors with colored light. This was the birth of the Gothic style, a style defined by light and height, but the pointed arch did not work alone. It was joined by its engineering partner, the Flying Buttress. These graceful, external stone arms reached over the sides of the building, latching onto the walls at the precise points where the arched ceilings pushed down. They acted like athletic spotters, catching the outward thrust and channeling it safely into the ground. Together, the pointed arch and the Flying Buttress created a skeletal system for buildings, a stone exoskeleton that allowed for structures of impossible delicacy and scale. This was medieval engineering at its most brilliant, turning the brute force of gravity into a soaring act of beauty. And while architects were mastering the flow of stone and light, another quiet invention was about to change the very flow of thought itself. Deep in the scriptoriums, where monks spent their lives copying texts by candlelight, a different limitation was taking its toll. As scribes aged, their eyesight would inevitably fail, blurring the precise letters that were their life's work. The solution emerged from the workshops of 13th century Italy, likely from anonymous glassmakers experimenting with lenses. They created the first spectacles, ground pieces of glass set in simple frames. These convex lenses were a simple tool to correct presbyopia, the farsightedness that comes with age, but their impact was profound. For the first time, a scholar, a clerk, or a master artisan could have decades of their productive life given back to them. They could continue their detailed work, their reading, their writing, with crystal clarity long into their later years. This was not just a convenience, it was a fundamental enhancement of human capability. Spectacles democratized access to knowledge and intricate craft, ensuring that the wisdom of one generation could be preserved and passed to the next with far greater accuracy. This humble pair of lenses resting on the nose was a direct catalyst for the intellectual flourishing to come, a quiet precursor to every technology that would ever seek to augment our natural senses. While scribes corrected their vision with new lenses, another invention was about to correct humanity's entire perception of time. For centuries, time was a fluid and personal thing, dictated by the sun's arc, the slow drip of a water clock, or the burning down of a candle. Life moved to the rhythms of nature, not to the tick of a mechanism. all of that changed with a single piece of engineering genius, the Verge Escapement. This small, intricate device was the true heart of the mechanical clock. It worked by using a swinging foliot, a weighted horizontal bar, to catch and release the clock's gears in a steady, rhythmic tick-tock. This was the breakthrough, a machine that could regulate itself, dividing the day into perfectly equal, measurable units entirely independent of the natural world. Soon, these complex machines of iron and brass began to appear in the towers of churches and town halls across Europe. Their bells would ring out over the cities, marking the hours for everyone to hear. For the first time, the entire community, from the merchant to the monk, was synchronized to the same precise rhythm. Work began and ended at a set hour, markets opened and closed together, and the calls to prayer became regimented. This was a social revolution driven by gears and weights. The mechanical clock did more than just tell time. It implanted a powerful new idea into the human mind. It suggested that the universe itself might run like a vast, complex, and orderly machine, a concept that would eventually become the bedrock of the scientific revolution. This newfound mastery over time, however, was just one part of a much larger medieval project, the conquest of nature's raw power. The mastery of time required a parallel command over matter itself, and for that, medieval innovators turned their attention to fire. For centuries, the production of iron was a slow, painstaking ritual. In small clay furnaces called bloomeries, iron ore was heated just enough to become a spongy, glowing mass known as a bloom. This bloom then had to be removed and beaten for hours by a blacksmith's hammer to squeeze out the impurities, a process that yielded a small, expensive piece of wrought iron. It was a craft of immense skill but painfully limited output. Then, in the 12th century, a new technology roared to life, a structure that would transform the very nature of metal. The blast furnace was a true titan of industry. It stood tall, often 2 stories high, and its secret weapon was a relentless, forced breath. Water wheels powered massive bellows that drove a continuous blast of air into the furnace's heart. This constant oxygen flow created infernal temperatures far beyond anything a bloomery could achieve, temperatures so high that the iron ore did not just soften, it completely melted. For the first time, iron became a liquid flowing like water. This liquid pig iron could be tapped from the furnace and poured directly into molds made of sand. This was the real revolution, casting. Suddenly, identical objects could be produced not one at a time by a master smith, but in vast quantities by unskilled laborers. The world was suddenly flooded with affordable cast iron goods. Think of the humble cooking pot, once a valuable household item, now commonplace. Firebacks for hearths, weights for clocks, and sadly, the first standardized cannonballs for warfare all poured forth from these fiery mouths. Iron was no longer a precious material shaped only for kings and knights. It had become the backbone of everyday life, a democratization of durability that built a sturdier world from the ground up. This fundamental shift from precious craft to mass production laid the entire industrial groundwork for the world that was to come. While the blast furnace was reshaping the world with cast iron, another quiet revolution was unfolding in the workshops of medieval weavers, one that would clothe the world in new comfort and complexity. For thousands of years, weaving was done on the vertical warp-weighted loom, a cumbersome frame that required the weaver to stand and use their own body weight to tension the threads. The process was slow, physically demanding, and limited in what it could produce. Then came the horizontal loom, a deceptively simple machine that changed everything. A weaver could now sit comfortably, operating foot pedals called treadles with their feet. This brilliant innovation controlled the heddles, the devices that separate the warp threads, leaving both of the weaver's hands completely free. With their hands liberated, they could now throw the shuttle which carries the crosswise weft thread back and forth with incredible speed and rhythm. The difference in efficiency was staggering. What once took days could now be accomplished in hours. But the horizontal loom was not just about speed, it was about capability. It could handle a much wider web of fabric, allowing for the creation of broadcloth and other wide textiles that were previously impossible. More importantly, the precise control offered by the foot pedals made intricate patterns and complex weaves far more achievable, paving the way for the elaborate textiles that would become symbols of status and wealth. This single machine transformed cloth from a painstakingly produced luxury into an affordable, everyday commodity. It also created a new class of highly skilled, specialized urban artisans, the weavers, who formed powerful guilds that became the economic heart of growing towns. The affordable cloth they produced clothed populations, fueled trade, and established the very model of workshop production that would, centuries later, explode into the Industrial Revolution. The horizontal loom did not just weave fabric, it wove the economic and social fabric of the modern world. That same mastery of metal that forged tools and textiles now shod the most vital engine of the medieval world, the horse. The partnership between humans and horses was a cornerstone of society, but for centuries it was a fragile one. A horse's hooves are made of keratin, the same material as our fingernails, and on long journeys over rough, stony ground, they would wear down, crack, and split, often leaving a noble steed lame and useless. The solution was brilliantly straightforward: the nailed iron horseshoe. While the concept had ancient roots, it was in the Middle Ages that this technology became widespread and standardized, transforming the horse from a vulnerable animal into a durable, all-terrain vehicle. A simple curved plate of iron, heated in a forge and then quickly nailed into the hard outer surface of the hoof, created a tough, replaceable shield. This was not a cruel practice. The hoof has no nerve endings in that area, much like trimming a fingernail. The effect, however, was revolutionary. A shod horse could work for years without going lame. It could pull a heavy plow through tough, root-filled soil without flinching, dramatically boosting the productivity of farms. It could carry a knight in full armor or pull a laden merchant's cart for dozens of miles on hard-packed Roman roads or new trade routes, accelerating communication and commerce to speeds previously unimaginable. And on the battlefield, this simple iron shoe created a more reliable and formidable cavalry, allowing for rapid maneuvers and shock charges that could decide the fate of kingdoms. The humble horseshoe did not just protect a hoof, it amplified the power of an entire civilization, turning the clip-clop of iron on cobblestone into the sound of progress itself. This new mobility, however, demanded a parallel revolution in how people navigated the world, a challenge that would be met not on land, but by looking to the stars from the deck of a ship. That simple iron shoe created a new kind of horse, one capable of unprecedented endurance. But to truly unlock the power of this partnership, a rider needed more than just a durable mount. He needed to become one with it. The key to this transformation was a deceptively simple pair of loops hanging from the saddle, the stirrup. While this technology had ancient roots in Asia, it was in medieval Europe that its full, earth-shattering potential was realized. Before the stirrup, a rider was essentially perched on his horse. He could use a spear or a sword, but a forceful impact would likely unseat him. The stirrup changed everything. By bracing his feet in these metal rings, a knight gained a stable, solid platform. He was no longer just a man on a horse, he was a unified, living weapon. Now he could couch a heavy lance under his arm, lock his body into the saddle, and charge. In that moment of impact, the full, terrifying momentum of a 1,000-pound warhorse at a full gallop was focused into the single point of his lance tip. This was not a spear thrust, it was a human projectile, a force so concentrated it could punch through shield, mail, and bone. This single innovation gave birth to the dominant military figure of the Middle Ages, the heavily armored knight. But creating such a warrior came at a staggering cost. A specially bred warhorse, a full suit of custom-fitted plate armor, and years of dedicated training from boyhood represented a fortune. Only a class of wealthy landowners could afford such an investment. This economic reality cemented the power of a landed aristocracy, forging the very backbone of the feudal system. In exchange for land, a lord would grant a knight the resources to equip himself, binding them in a web of military service and loyalty. The stirrup, therefore, was far more than a riding aid. It was a social lever that restructured society around the power of the armored charge, defining warfare and hierarchy for centuries to come. This new form of combat, however, demanded a new kind of portable, personal power source, one that could store immense energy and release it in an instant. The power of the armored knight relied on a personal energy source, the tension stored in a drawn bow or the force of a couched lance. But to unleash power across vast, uncharted oceans required a different kind of force altogether, one guided not by muscle but by the stars themselves. That guidance came from an object of breathtaking beauty and complexity, the Astrolabe. Think of it not as a simple tool, but as a portable universe crafted from brass. This intricate device, often no larger than a saucer, was an analog computer centuries before the term existed. Its moving parts, carefully engraved with a map of the heavens, could be aligned with the positions of known stars. In the hands of a skilled user, it became a problem-solving machine for the cosmos. It could tell you the time of day or night, predict the rising and setting of the sun, and even calculate your latitude, your position north or south on the globe. This last function was its true gift to humanity. For a ship's captain sailing across the featureless expanse of the sea, the Astrolabe was a lifeline. By measuring the angle of the North Star above the horizon, a navigator could determine his ship's latitude, allowing him to plot an east-west course with a confidence never before possible. This was not just about exploration, it was about predictable, repeatable travel. Trade routes became safer and more reliable, connecting continents and cultures in a web of commerce and knowledge. The Astrolabe encapsulated a deep, sophisticated understanding of spherical astronomy, a whole universe of knowledge folded into a pocket-sized instrument. It was this humble brass disc that began the precise mapping of our world, setting the stage for the great voyages that would eventually connect the globe. And as navigators used these tools to conquer distance, another invention was quietly revolutionizing how we capture and distribute the very ideas that make such journeys possible. The relentless power of the wind had always been a fact of life, but medieval engineers saw it not as a force to endure, but as a resource to be captured. Their solution was a structure of pure ingenuity, the post mill. This was not a fixed building, it was a dynamic machine. The entire wooden body, housing the massive gears and grinding stones, was balanced on a single, enormous central post. When the wind changed direction, the miller and his family could physically push a long tail pole, rotating the entire heavy structure to face the breeze head-on. It was a brilliant, simple adaptation that turned a fickle power source into a reliable one. Soon, the silhouettes of these creaking giants appeared across the flat plains of northern Europe and the arid landscapes of the Middle East. Inside, the wind's energy was transformed. As the sails turned, they drove a vertical shaft connected to a complex system of cogwheels. This gearing transferred the horizontal spin of the sails into the rapid vertical rotation of a millstone, grinding wheat into flour with a consistency and scale that human or animal power could never match. But the windmill's purpose quickly expanded beyond bread. Its turning power was harnessed to pump water from low-lying fields, reclaiming vast tracts of land for agriculture. Later, it would be adapted to drive saws, cutting timber for shipbuilding and construction with tireless mechanical precision. This was the true revolution. The windmill freed industry from its tether to the riverbank. A community no longer needed a fast-flowing stream to power its industry. It could now build its economic engine anywhere the wind blew steady. This was a monumental leap in humanity's relationship with the planet, the beginning of our ability to tap into the vast, ambient energy flows of the Earth itself to fuel our ambitions. While the windmill harnessed nature's power for peaceful industry, another machine weaponized the very same physics for war. The Counterweight Trebuchet was the ultimate siege engine, a terrifyingly efficient machine that could reduce the strongest castle walls to rubble. Its design was a masterclass in leverage. Unlike earlier catapults that relied on the twisted tension of ropes or sinews, the trebuchet's power came from gravity itself. Its key innovation was the replacement of human pulling crews with a massive counterweight, a giant wooden box filled with tons of earth, stone, or even lead. This weight was suspended from the short end of a giant pivoting beam. To fire the weapon, a team would winch down the long end of the beam, raising the colossal counterweight high into the air. A massive stone projectile, sometimes weighing as much as a small car, was loaded into a sling attached to the beam's tip. With the release mechanism triggered, the counterweight plunged downward. This fall whipped the long arm upward in a violent arc, and at the perfect moment, one end of the sling would release, hurling the stone on a high, arcing trajectory. The force generated was immense and devastatingly consistent, allowing crews to methodically target the same section of a distant wall, pounding it until it cracked and collapsed. This was not a weapon of chance, it was a machine of calculated demolition. The arrival of a trebuchet on the battlefield changed everything. It could stand safely out of bowshot and yet deliver a destructive payload that made older siege weapons look like toys. Its very existence forced a revolution in military architecture. Castle builders had to abandon tall, thin walls in favor of lower, thicker, and more resilient designs. They began constructing rounded towers that could better deflect incoming shots and added complex outer defenses to keep these monstrous machines at a greater distance. The counterweight trebuchet was more than just a weapon. It was a pinnacle of pre-gunpowder mechanical engineering, a brutal application of physics that held entire garrisons hostage to the relentless, predictable swing of a falling weight. The soaring ambition of Gothic architecture presented masons with a terrifying paradox. How could walls be built impossibly high and yet be mostly empty space, filled with vast, colored windows? The stone itself seemed to rebel against this dream, pushing outward with immense lateral force that threatened to shatter the entire structure. The solution was not to build thicker walls, but to build smarter ones, and it came in the form of an elegant stone arm, the Flying Buttress. This was not a hidden support, it was an honest and breathtaking piece of structural engineering. A flying buttress is a slender stone arch that leaps from a massive, free-standing pier some distance from the main wall, connecting to the building at the precise point where the roof's vaults push downward and outward. Think of it not as a crutch but as a graceful exoskeleton. These stone arms gracefully catch the outward thrust of the roof and channel it safely down into their own piers and into the ground. This single innovation liberated the interior wall from its load-bearing duties. No longer did it need to be a solid, windowless bulwark. Instead, it could become a delicate screen of stone tracery and brilliant stained glass. This is why walking into a Gothic cathedral feels like stepping into a cage of light and color, a space that defies gravity itself. The Flying Buttress turned brute physical force into a seemingly weightless art form, proving that the greatest strength often lies not in resisting a force, but in guiding it gracefully to where it needs to go. The relentless rhythm of the trip hammer was the heartbeat of medieval industry. Deep within a water-powered forge, a massive wooden hammerhead, sometimes weighing hundreds of pounds, rose and fell with a deafening mechanical certainty. Its power came from a simple wooden cam attached to the axle of a water wheel. As the wheel turned, the cam would catch the long handle of the hammer, lifting it high before releasing it to drop with its full, crushing weight onto a glowing piece of iron resting on an anvil below. This was not a tool for delicate work, but for brute force transformation. It could beat the slag out of a bloom of wrought iron in minutes, a task that would take a blacksmith hours of exhausting labor. It could shape red-hot metal into identical tools, nails, or weapon parts with a consistency no human arm could ever match. This automation revolutionized metal production. A single water wheel could drive multiple hammers, creating a factory-like environment where the pace was set by the flow of the river, not the endurance of the smith. This was a profound conceptual leap, the first step toward a world where machines would not just assist human labor, but replace its most grueling aspects entirely. The trip hammer was a clear declaration that the power of nature could be channeled to build the very bones of civilization, forging the components for everything from plows to armor on an industrial scale. This mastery over metal, however, was just one part of a larger revolution in control, a revolution that would soon be guided by the most delicate of mechanisms. Yet the warmth of the forge and the comfort of the castle were nothing without a way to manage the fire itself. For centuries, the heart of a common home was a central hearth, an open fire whose smoke had no choice but to drift upward, staining the ceiling and stinging the eyes as it searched for a simple hole in the roof. Life in these great halls was a sooty, smoky affair, where the air was thick and every surface was coated in a fine black grime. The introduction of the Masonry Chimney, with its enclosed flue, was a quiet revolution in domestic comfort. This was not just an improvement, it was a complete reinvention of the indoor environment. By building the fireplace against an outside wall and channeling the smoke through a dedicated brick or stone shaft, the chimney finally banished the smoke from the living space. For the first time, a family could gather around a fire without choking on its byproducts. The air inside became clear and breathable, a simple luxury we take for granted today. But the impact went far beyond clean air. This new design freed architects from the tyranny of the single, central room. With fireplaces now safely placed on exterior walls, a home could be divided. Walls could be built, creating separate, specialized rooms. The Great Hall could now have a private solar, a separate sleeping chamber for the family. Servants could have their own quarters, and kitchens could be partitioned off. This was the birth of privacy and specialization within the ordinary home. The chimney did not just carry away smoke, it carried away an entire way of life, replacing the communal, all-purpose hall with a new model of domestic living defined by comfort, cleanliness, and personal space. It made the indoors a true refuge from the elements, reshaping both architecture and the very nature of family life for centuries to come. Even when the sky was a blanket of gray, a new tool promised a way home. The magnetic compass was a navigator's true north, a constant guide when the sun and stars vanished. Its early form was almost humble, just a sliver of magnetized iron floating on a straw in a bowl of water. This needle, touched by the mysterious force of the Earth's own magnetic field, would swing unerringly to point north. Later, this needle was fixed to a card marked with the cardinal directions, creating the instrument we would recognize today. This was not a European invention, but a piece of global ingenuity, a technology that likely traveled from China along the sprawling medieval trade routes. Its value, however, was universal. For a ship's captain staring into a fog bank or sailing for weeks across an empty ocean, the compass was nothing short of a miracle. It provided a fixed reference point in a world of shifting seas and skies. No longer did a vessel have to hug the coastline, a dangerous and slow process. With a compass, a captain could strike out directly across open water, maintaining a straight course with confidence regardless of the weather. This single device slashed the risks and the duration of maritime journeys, making trade more predictable and profitable. It was the indispensable partner to the Astrolabe, one tool giving direction, the other giving position. Together, they unlocked the oceans, setting the stage for the legendary voyages that would forever change our map of the world. Those brilliant windows of sapphire blue and ruby red were not just colored glass, they were alchemy made solid. To achieve such transcendent colors, medieval artisans became masters of chemical reactions, working with substances whose true nature they could not yet fully understand. They discovered that by adding specific metallic oxides to their vats of molten glass, they could create a permanent, luminous palette. A small amount of cobalt oxide produced that deep, heavenly blue that has captivated viewers for centuries. Gold chloride, painstakingly prepared, yielded the legendary ruby red, a color so rich it seemed to glow with its own inner fire. Copper oxides gave them vibrant greens, and silver compounds created sunny yellows. But the chemistry was only the beginning. Once the colored sheets were cooled, the true artistry commenced. Each piece had to be cut to a precise pattern, a task often done with a hot iron to score the glass before breaking it. Then, details like faces, hands, and folds of cloth were painted on using a special glass paint containing ground copper or iron filings suspended in a liquid medium. This was the most delicate step. The entire panel was then fired in a kiln, fusing the painted details permanently onto the glass surface. Finally, the individual pieces were assembled like a luminous jigsaw puzzle, held together by strips of flexible lead came, soldered at the joints to create a single, sturdy image. This entire process, from chemistry to kiln, transformed mere sunlight into a medium for storytelling and spiritual awe. Stepping into a cathedral filled with this glass was an immersive experience unlike any other. The light itself became a sermon, painting the stone floors and the faces of the congregation with a divine glow. This was a technology of light, a sophisticated, empirical understanding of material science that turned architecture into a transcendent, emotional experience, a feat of engineering for the soul. While the Astrolabe was a marvel of brass and calculation, it demanded a navigator stare directly into the sun, a painful and often blinding limitation. The solution was a device of beautiful simplicity, the cross staff. Picture a long, narrow staff of wood marked with a scale and a sliding crosspiece that moved along its length. A sailor would hold the staff to his eye, then slide the crosspiece until its lower end appeared to touch the horizon and its upper end lined up with the sun. The scale on the staff then gave him the sun's altitude, its angle above the horizon. It was a straightforward application of basic trigonometry, a triangle formed between the eye, the horizon, and the celestial body. Yet this simple tool had a dangerous flaw, forcing sailors to gaze straight at the sun's blinding glare. The answer to this problem was an ingenious reinvention, the backstaff. Its name reveals its brilliance. A navigator using this instrument would turn his back to the sun. He would look through a sight on the main staff toward the horizon, while adjusting a sliding shadow vane on a second, smaller arc until the sun's shadow fell exactly on the horizon sight. By avoiding the sun's direct glare entirely, he could take a safe and accurate measurement. These instruments transformed celestial navigation from a perilous art into a repeatable science. With a measured angle and a set of published navigational tables, a ship's captain could pinpoint his latitude, his position north or south, with a confidence that reshaped the world. This new precision slashed the guesswork from transoceanic voyages. A captain sailing from Europe to the Caribbean, for instance, could now sail south to a known latitude, then turn west with the certainty that he would hit his island target. This was the crucial step that made global trade routes not just possible but predictable. The cross-staff and backstaff were the humble, practical tools that quietly powered the age of discovery, proving that the most profound revolutions often begin with a simple act of measurement. Even the most reliable river could sometimes run low, leaving its waterwheels still and silent. But medieval engineers discovered a power source far more dependable than any seasonal stream, one that pulsed with the rhythm of the cosmos itself. They looked to the coast and saw the daily miracle of the tides, the sea breathing in and out under the moon's invisible pull. Their solution was the Tidal Mill, a masterpiece of environmental adaptation. Constructed across the mouth of a sheltered estuary or a narrow inlet, these mills featured a crucial innovation, a massive sluice gate. As the high tide surged in, this gate was opened, allowing the sea to flood a large, constructed reservoir known as a mill pond. At the peak of the tide, the gate was slammed shut, trapping a colossal volume of seawater. Then, everyone waited. As the tide receded, the sea level outside the pond dropped dramatically, creating a powerful difference in height. Only then was the sluice gate opened again, releasing the pent-up water in a controlled torrent that spun a mighty water wheel with relentless force. This was not just using water, it was time shifting its power, storing the ocean's energy for hours to be used on demand. This system represented a profound understanding of natural cycles, an early and brilliant form of renewable energy that ran on the limitless, predictable clockwork of lunar gravity. These mills were not built just anywhere. They required a deep knowledge of local geography and tidal patterns, a true fusion of astronomy, hydrology, and mechanical engineering. By harnessing the moon's pull to grind their grain, these communities were tapping into the very forces that move our planet, demonstrating a foresight that feels remarkably modern. This ability to work in harmony with nature's rhythms rather than fight against them marks a hidden chapter in our technological story, one that would eventually inspire a very different kind of power, born from the simple act of reading a book. That same principle of redirecting force, so elegantly solved in architecture, was now applied to the very animal that powered the farm. For centuries, farmers faced a frustrating and deadly limitation with their most valuable asset, the draft horse. The traditional harness was a simple strap of leather that wrapped around the animal's throat and girth. When the horse leaned into its load to pull a plow or a heavy cart, this strap would press directly against its windpipe. The harder the horse pulled, the more it choked itself, severely limiting its power and often leading to injury or suffocation under a heavy burden. It was a tragically inefficient design that pitted the animal's strength against its own ability to breathe. Then came a revolution in leather and wood, the rigid horse collar. This was not a strap, but a well-padded, rigid frame that sat comfortably on the horse's powerful shoulders and breastbone. The crucial difference was one of physics. The collar allowed the horse to push forward with its entire body, driving with its strong hindquarters and transferring that force through the rigid frame. The pressure was now on the skeletal structure, the strongest part of the animal, completely bypassing the vulnerable throat. The effect was immediate and staggering. A single horse equipped with a proper collar could now pull 3 to 4 times the weight it could with the old harness. This was a power upgrade of monumental proportions. Suddenly, the horse was not just an alternative to the ox, it was a superior one. Horses were faster, could work longer hours, and with this new harness, they were far stronger. This single innovation accelerated every aspect of agricultural life. Plowing a field could be done in a fraction of the time, allowing farmers to cultivate more land and plant more crops. Heavy carts laden with grain or goods could now travel farther and faster, linking remote farms to bustling town markets with new efficiency. The rigid horse collar did more than just make a horse stronger. It supercharged the entire medieval economy, turning local subsistence into a web of regional trade and abundance, all because someone finally understood how to let an animal breathe while it worked. That relentless tick-tock echoing from a church tower was the sound of a new idea taking hold of the world. The verge and foliate escapement was not just a piece of clockwork, it was the very soul of the mechanical clock. Before its invention, timekeeping devices like water clocks were at the mercy of their environment, their flow slowing with temperature or clogging with sediment. The escapement solved this with a stroke of pure mechanical genius. Its purpose was to tame the raw, unchecked force of a falling weight. Imagine a weighted rope wrapped around a drum, desperate to unwind in a sudden rush. The escapement acted as a strict gatekeeper. A crown wheel driven by the weight tried to spin freely, but a vertical rod, the verge, had 2 small pallets that engaged the teeth of this wheel. At the top of the verge sat the foliate, a horizontal bar with adjustable weights. As a tooth of the crown wheel pushed against one pallet, it would rotate the verge, which would swing the foliate. The inertia of this swinging bar would then carry the verge just far enough for the tooth to escape, only for the second pallet to immediately catch the next tooth on the opposite side. This created a continuous, alternating lock, swing, and release. Tick, then tock. This rhythmic oscillation was the breakthrough, a self-regulating pulse that chopped the steady pull of gravity into perfectly measured, equal beats. For the first time in history, a machine could dictate its own pace, independent of the sun, the stars, or a dripping water source. This was the birth of autonomous, accurate time. The relentless, predictable rhythm of the escapement did more than tell the hour. It implanted a powerful new metaphor into the human mind, the idea of the universe as a vast, complex, and orderly machine. This single, intricate mechanism set humanity on an irreversible path toward a world governed not by nature's cycles, but by the precise, mechanical heartbeat of a machine. Those alchemists, shrouded in secrecy and symbolism, were perfecting a process that would outlive their mystical dreams. In their dimly lit workshops, surrounded by cryptic manuscripts, they were not just searching for gold, they were pioneering a fundamental technology of separation, distillation. Their primary tools were elegant in their design, the alembic and the retort. An alembic was a 2-part apparatus, typically made of glass or copper. It consisted of a boiling vessel called the cucurbit, where the raw material was heated. Attached to this was a cap, the alembic proper, which had a long, tapering spout. As the substance in the cucurbit was heated, its volatile components would vaporize. These vapors would travel up into the cap and down through the curved spout, which was cooled by the ambient air or a water bath. This cooling caused the vapors to condense back into a liquid, which would then drip into a separate collection flask. The genius of this setup was its ability to separate substances based on a single, crucial property, their boiling point. The component with the lowest boiling point would vaporize first. leaving the others behind, allowing for a remarkably pure extraction. While their ultimate goal was the legendary Philosopher's Stone, this meticulous process yielded treasures far more tangible and transformative. They called the pure, distilled spirit they produced aqua vitae, the water of life. This was not the weak wine or beer of the tavern, but a potent, clear liquid that could be used as a solvent, a preservative, and of course, a powerful beverage. The same principles were applied to extract the very essence of plants, creating potent essential oils and perfumes that captured the soul of a flower in a single drop. Later, by distilling minerals, they produced strong acids that could dissolve metals, opening new frontiers in material science. Every careful adjustment of the flame, every drop collected, was an unconscious step toward a new science. The alchemist's quest for transmutation failed, but in its place, it gifted humanity with the experimental method, the precise apparatus, and the chemical processes that would become the bedrock of modern chemistry. Their mystical practice, driven by a desire to transform lead into gold, had instead transformed superstition into the first true laboratory science. The rhythmic swing of a hammer or the steady push of a pump handle, these back and forth motions are some of the most fundamental forces we can create. For centuries, this reciprocating movement was a mechanical dead end, useful but trapped in a single, linear dimension. The genius of the medieval crankshaft was to set that motion free, to bend it into a circle and unlock its true potential. At its heart, the concept is breathtakingly simple. A crank is just an arm attached at a right angle to a rotating shaft. When you turn the shaft, the end of the arm moves in a circle. But the real magic happens in reverse. If you push and pull that arm back and forth, you force the shaft to rotate. This is the conversion of reciprocating motion into rotary motion. We see this principle beautifully at work in the humble rotary grindstone. A foot pedal or a handle would be pushed down, moving a rod back and forth. This rod was connected to a crank, which transformed that linear pumping action into the smooth, continuous spin of the grinding wheel. Suddenly, sharpening a tool became a far more efficient, one-person job. This was not just a minor convenience, it was a fundamental reimagining of how force could be applied. The crankshaft demonstrated a deep, intuitive grasp of kinematics, the geometry of motion. It showed that energy did not have to be linear, that it could be redirected, transformed, and made continuous. This single principle, first perfected to sharpen a scythe or drive a bellows, would become the invisible, beating heart of the industrial and digital ages. Every car engine on the road today is a testament to this medieval insight, where the controlled explosions of pistons moving up and down are captured by a crankshaft and spun into the rotation that drives our world forward. High above the bustling market square, a heavy stone began its slow, deliberate descent. This was the heart of the new public clock, a weight-driven engine of time that would govern the city's rhythm for days on end. Unlike a water clock that could freeze in winter or a spring that would unwind and lose its power, this falling weight delivered a constant, unwavering force. It was this relentless pull, channeled through the intricate dance of the verge and foliate escapement, that gave the clock its steady, authoritative voice. The deep, resonant chime that echoed from the church tower was not just telling the hour, it was announcing a revolution in daily life. For the first time, the entire town, from the baker to the blacksmith, awoke to the same bell, opened their shops at the same bell, and closed for the meal at the same bell. This was a new, secular heartbeat for the community, a shared schedule that existed alongside the canonical hours of prayer. Punctuality was no longer a vague concept but a civic virtue, woven into the very fabric of urban society. The public clock created a collective consciousness of time, one that belonged not just to the monastery, but to the merchants, the guilds, and the people, synchronizing human endeavor on a scale never before possible, and laying the groundwork for the modern world's obsession with the ticking clock. Those humble spectacles resting on a scholar's nose were just the beginning of a much deeper exploration. The medieval lens grinder, hunched over his rotating wheel with a piece of glass in hand, was an unwitting pioneer. His goal was practical, to correct a monk's fading eyesight or a scribe's nearsightedness, but with every careful stroke, with every application of polishing grit, he was engaging in a profound act of manipulation. He was learning to command light itself. By grinding a piece of glass to a specific curvature, he discovered he could bend light rays, forcing them to converge or diverge on command. This was not theoretical physics, it was a hands-on craft, a slow accumulation of optical knowledge passed from master to apprentice. The quality of these lenses improved incrementally over generations. What started as simple, slightly blurry magnifiers evolved into precisely shaped convex and concave lenses, each type capable of correcting a different flaw in human vision. This gradual refinement, driven by the demands of an aging, literate population, created a reservoir of expertise and a supply of high-quality glass. It was from this fertile ground that two world-shattering instruments would eventually spring. The same basic principles used to magnify a manuscript for an aging eye could, when lenses were combined in a tube, be turned outward to reveal the craters of the moon or inward to unveil a universe teeming with life in a single drop of water. The centuries of patient grinding were a necessary prelude, a slow focusing of human ingenuity that would soon bring the farthest reaches of the cosmos and the hidden structures of our own bodies into stunning, undeniable view. That mastery of vision and the power of the printed word would have meant little without a surface to carry their message. For centuries, knowledge was shackled to the skin of animals. Parchment and vellum, painstakingly prepared from the hides of sheep or calves, were incredibly durable but prohibitively expensive. A single Bible could require the skins of more than 200 animals, a cost that placed books firmly in the hands of the church and the ultra-wealthy. This was a world where knowledge was literally written on leather, a heavy and exclusive medium. The transformation began with a humble pulp. Paper, a Chinese invention, had traveled the Silk Road, but in medieval Europe it found a new industrial scale. The key was the water-powered paper mill. These mills turned the arduous craft of sheet making into a mechanized process. Rag collectors would gather old linen and cotton, which were then soaked and beaten by water-powered hammers into a fine, mushy pulp. This pulp was suspended in a large vat, and a worker would dip a wire mesh screen into the slurry, lifting out a perfect, thin layer of fibers. The water would drain away, and the wet sheet would be pressed and then hung to dry. This system was relentless. A single mill could produce thousands of sheets in the time it took a scribe to prepare a few pages of parchment. The economic effect was immediate and profound. Paper cost a fraction of the price of parchment. Suddenly, the cost of writing plummeted. Account books, personal letters, school lessons, and popular literature became affordable for merchants, students, and a growing middle class. This flood of affordable paper was the essential, silent partner to Gutenberg's printing press. The press provided the means for mass reproduction, but paper provided the affordable canvas. Together, they broke the monopoly on written knowledge. Ideas could now spread faster and farther than ever before, fueling the fires of the Renaissance, the Reformation, and the Scientific Revolution. The humble paper mill, with its rhythmic, pounding hammers, did not just make pulp, it pulverized the barriers to information, setting the stage for the modern world where knowledge truly belongs to everyone. So much for the Dark Ages. We have traveled from the quiet fields transformed by the heavy plow to the celestial calculations of the Astrolabe, from the rhythmic heartbeat of the mechanical clock to the alchemical fires that birthed modern chemistry. Each of these 25 marvels stands as a testament to an era of profound ingenuity, a 1,000-year workshop where necessity mothered inventions that were truly centuries ahead of their time. This was not a period of stagnation waiting for the Renaissance to arrive and rescue it. It was the indispensable foundation, the crucial layer of innovation upon which our modern world was built. These forgotten engineers, masons, and visionaries did not just leave behind castles and cathedrals. They left us the very frameworks of our daily lives, the concepts of time, vision, and mechanical power that we now take for granted. Their legacy is a powerful reminder that human creativity is not confined to any single golden age. It flourishes in every era, often in the most humble and unexpected places, solving the pressing problems of the day with quiet brilliance. The next time you glance at the clock on your wall, adjust your glasses, or marvel at the soaring stonework of an old church, take a moment to remember the medieval minds who first unlocked these possibilities. Their world was not dark, it was simply waiting for us to look closer and see the light. If this journey has reshaped your view of history, we would love to hear what surprised you the most in the comments below, and subscribe for more adventures into the hidden corners of our past.